Hi, I'm Maria Thea Harris of Fellow Sews on social media. Welcome back to Sew Over 50 podcast on Sew Organised Style. Stay listening.
Sew Organised Style podcast acknowledges traditional owners of country throughout Australia. We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to the elders past, present and emerging.
Thanks for joining us on Sew Over 50 podcast as we continue with this series featuring the men in the Sew Over 50 community. Sew Over 50 intersects with all communities. Thanks for coming back to Sew Over 50 podcast as we continue with this series featuring the men who sew in the Sew Over 50 community. Sew Over 50 intersects with all communities. Last week was Simon Turner at Made by Silver Fox for Sew Over 50. Today is part 2, where he talks more about the men in the Sew Over 50 community, as well as his views about sewing. If you've missed the first episode of Simon Turner's podcast last week, please go back and listen to part 1 so that you get the full picture of what he's all about. Have you seen men who sew who are part of the Sew Over 50 community?
I do follow the Sew Over 50 hashtag. There's not many of us, I must say. We are in a small minority, but I think that the girls, Sandy and Judith, Sandy often responds, I think, just because we're on the same timeline, but Judith has commented on a couple of my posts recently too. So because they do their stories where they gather pictures from other people, that's an interesting one, because I think from a guy's side, I think we maybe make up 1 in 20, 1 in 30 sort of post sort of range. You know, that's probably the relative size of our community. And if I see something on there, I follow into their post and have a look through. There seems to be the two groups, the guys who have been sewing for years and years and sew really well, and the guys who have picked it up later in life. And yeah, I think you can find things in both areas. And also, look, I think it's a great area where you can go off and start following the people who have got only a couple of followers and giving a little shout out to those, because I think it's really uplifting as a new sewer to have someone come through and make a comment. And definitely when you have someone like Peter Lappin come through and message on one of your posts, that feels really cool, because, hey, here's someone who's got, thousands and thousands of followers, and yet he looked at mine. Hey, how good was that?
It would feel really good.
So, yeah, look, I tend to probably follow the stories and then use the stories, that breadcrumb, to get through to other people. But I'd probably follow that same sort of ratio. I think I follow 90% of the people that I follow are female and 10 or 5% are male. That's what the sewing community is. I don't differentiate between males and females, probably because I make as many male clothes as what I make as female clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the one with the Sew Over 50, there's a bit that I do especially like, which is when the people are sewing the ones for grandkids. Yeah, those ones, I must say, I enjoy seeing those ones in there as well.
Oh, good. Shout out to all the Sew Over 50 followers who are making clothes for their grandchildren. That's really good to hear, because we haven't had that before.
Yeah. That's definitely an aspect, I think, of what people expect as well. People expect that, oh yeah, grandma makes my clothes, but I don't know how many of them actually do. It's a wonderful community to be part of.
Are there any particular hashtags you use to connect with other men who sew in the community?
I probably use the Men Who Sew, I think, is probably the main one. I do sort of look through and try and mix around the hashtags that I use, just because I don't know how they work and how much they get things around. Yeah, I think I probably use some hashtags that have nothing at all to do with sewing, like hashtag dress up. Well, I was doing a dress up. So therefore I use that as a hashtag. Whether that's going to fall through onto someone else's thread and they'll look at it and go, what the heck is that? That's probably an area that I can learn a little bit more about around hashtags. So
okay. And before we finish up, what is your future sewing pattern wish list?
Definitely that bomber jacket with a fur line. I've got 3 half-finished jackets in my stash. I started them too late in winter, and winter was too short here in Australia. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start looking for winter clothes in February this year so that I've made them and got them ready for the start of winter. I still have the Alba shirt that I need to make. I've definitely got the Joan trousers for my daughter, another one that is sitting there that I've got the pattern that's sitting there unopened. So I'll say my future sewing pattern wish list is to use those patterns that are sitting in my cupboard. I probably don't need to buy any more. I probably need to use the ones that I've got.
Oh, probably.
Probably, but that's probably something that we all have to do. So
Yeah. Simon, thank you so much for coming on to Sew Over 50's podcast to talk to us about how you started sewing and what keeps you sewing. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was, as my first podcast, it was a very pleasurable experience. Thank you.
That's really good to hear. I was trying to make sure that all of our podcast guests have a good experience. So thank you, Simon.
Yeah, no, it's great. Never done an interview. I did end up in
Peppermint Magazine.
In Peppermint last month, and that was sort of like, again, I think it was just the same. It was someone sent a message through, and it was to a friend, and she just said, "Oh, does anyone know any male sewers?" I think that was the thread. So she sent it through to me and said, "Oh yeah, I can have a chat with them." So yeah, we did this whole thing, but I had all the questions, had all the answers, wrote all these answers out, and then became like 3 paragraphs. But hey, it was pretty cool. There was a segue between myself to George Clooney in the 1 paragraph.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool.
I am so honored that you are now on this podcast. Even more so. Thank you so much, Simon.
How I said about Peter Lappin. So Peter Lappin follows me now, and I'm sort of like, I comment on a couple of my things beforehand, but like, how's that for a group of people to be associated with in the same article? And Mr. Domestic as well came through. But yeah, it was just, I thought it was really cool. This was what we spoke about in my intro to all of my teams yesterday. So when they did, tell me something about you, the person I was replacing who's going off on mat leave, and she said, maybe we'll do something like, tell us something that we don't know about you. And I said, well, you don't know anything about me because I'm brand new. So I said in the first one, I said, look, I learned to sew over COVID. And she went, oh, that's really cool. Then we got into the next one. These meetings were 15 minutes apart. So I'm meeting 5 teams for 15 minutes each. And then it was like I sew over COVID, and by the way, I was in a magazine last month. And then I go, oh wow, that's really cool. And then it was like, I sewed over COVID. I was in a magazine, and tomorrow I'm getting recorded for a podcast. And wow, this is really cool. And I'm in a magazine, I'm in a podcast, and tomorrow I'm going off to picking up 10 meters worth of fabric to start sewing for Christmas. And they're just like, oh wow. So yeah, my umbrella is 10 meters of canvas, and I also got 10 meters of terry toweling. So the canvas will match the terry, and I'll probably also make some cushions as well.
Yep.
For the lawn lounges. And so then we'll have everything there. The only thing is, and this is a bit I'm a little bit worried about, is it's not graded as outdoor canvas. They were hesitant on saying, hey, yeah, look, this is good. But it was still maybe about a third of the price of buying specific outdoor furniture and fabric. And the one that we wanted, which was from 3 Beaches up in Queensland, wouldn't be ready for, I think it was 20 weeks.
Wow, that's a long time to wait.
And that was, so I went, oh, no, that's all of summer. Let's do this. If it works, it works. I'll use some fabric protector, and, hey, we used to use canvas for tents, and, my old scout tent when I was this high, was made of canvas, and that was probably 50 years old when I was in it, and is probably still being used today. So the material's still got to be usable, and it's just how you treat it. So hopefully it should work well. But yeah, look, thanks, Maria. This has certainly been fun. Yeah, it's a cool thing to be part of. And you should be really proud that you're building that community, because, I think this is where communities build on pillars, and you've got to have the people that build that pillar and bring those people together. So yeah, I think this is a great way of doing it.
This podcast supports the So Over 50 community, and that's driven by Judith and Sandy.
Yep.
And the blog posts are written by Susan Young.
Yep.
They're at 38,000 followers now.
Mm.
And it's growing by 1,000 followers a month.
Wow.
And that's really good. And you're right, it is a community, and it's an inclusive community. They intersect with all communities. And I think that's what I love about helping them out.
Yeah, I think, and look, that's definitely a piece. There is many more, I'll call it whole body shapes shown across the group. Whereas, yeah, if you go into the younger demographics, not necessarily the sewing community, but just Instagram, I don't know that it's as healthy. The whole TikTok and the algorithm of turning in on itself isn't a positive experience at all. Whereas I think from the So Over 50, you see all ranges, and often you see the large size and the small size together. So then you can go, oh yeah, I might not be this, but I need to know whether that pattern's going to work for me or against me. So yeah, I think that's definitely a piece of that inclusivity that we don't necessarily get in the wider media. Yeah, I think I wish I had joined Instagram a long time ago. I wish I had learned to sew again a long time ago. That is probably my only regret, is that it has taken me so long to sew. I would have loved to have been able to sew when my daughter was younger, and been able to make all those cute little sweet outfits that I see. That would have been really nice to be able to do that Sewn by Dad label inside of her outfits. Yeah, that would have been cool. So, but hey, look, I'll be a granddad at some point. Who knows?
So you'll have the Sewn by Granddad label on those clothes.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be great.
Yep, that'll be pretty cool. So, yeah.
Well, Simon, thanks again for being on the podcast.
You're welcome, Maria. Thank you. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, and have a lovely day, listeners. This episode of So Over 50 podcast on Sew Organised Style was produced by me, Maria Theoharis, with permission of Simon, sound by bensound.com. You can subscribe to Sew Organised Style podcast, but with an S, not a Z, on all good podcast apps. Please give us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to us. Make sure you go back and listen to our Sew Over 50 podcast archive and catch up on this series about the men who sew. Every podcast on Sew Organised Style is free, and there are over 280 to choose from. Post any questions or suggestions you have on our Instagram account at Sew Organised Style, or on our website at www.seworganisedstyle.com, or on our Facebook page. We look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.